Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is your Nikon D800 preview video. That's right, the D800 is officially real, and I've held it, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. We're going to go down the specs, then we're going to hit on how it is with photos, we're going to hit on the video specs, and we're going to get to my feelings, what I think about this camera, who it's for, would I get one, and all of that good stuff. So it's a very, very interesting camera. There's pros, there's cons, there's ups, there's downs, left rights, BAs, and starts. So first things first, it's a 36.3 megapixel sensor. That is a ton of megapixels. From what I hear from the guys at Nikon, and from when I sat with this I sat with a demo unit. It was a sample unit, so it wasn't the official one yet. The guy was telling me that it's incredible dynamic range. There's incredible dynamic range, incredible color here, and he really loved the camera in the studio and landscape situations. With that said, there's actually two cameras. There's a Nikon D800 and a Nikon D800E. The E is for people that don't want that low-pass filter. Basically, they want uninhibited light to hit the sensor, because in most of our DSLRs, there's a sensor, not a sensor, there's a filter, a low-pass filter that basically cuts down on the moiraying that can happen with your images if it didn't have it there. That's something that happened a long time ago back in the day with the earlier digital cameras, but really you get a sharper image without that filter on there. So there's a second camera. We're going to get to the pricing of that a little later and maybe talk about that in more details, like who it's for and why you would actually want that. But, you know, so here we are. We have that 36.3 FX sensor. You can shoot it in DX crop mode, which is 15.4 megapixels. That is just slightly under, well, what the D4 has. That's more than what my D3S has, but again, that's in the DX crop mode to give you the 1.5 times more. The ISO range is 100 to 6400, so not nearly as far as what the D4 will give you. It's an interesting place for this camera. One, it's 36.3 megapixels. That's replacing, in my mind, the D3X. So that 8,000 camera, that $8,000 camera has probably been put out to pasture now by basically a $3,000 camera, because it has the 36.3 megapixel sensor. I would opt for this over a D3X at this point. But the high ISO capability isn't here as much, because it tops out at 6400 before you get into the +1 and +2, or the, you know, the 0.7 and all of that. I think it goes to 25,500. You'll see annotations popping up on the screen throughout this video. But, you know, we're going to get to who this is for and would I get one and all of that as we move on further. But, you know, the dynamic range was something that they really punched me in the head about. That the dynamic range is incredible. The quality of the image and the tones and the colors and everything there are really, really great. So that's something to keep in mind. 3.2-inch screen. It's going to have the same screen as what the D4 has. So I would expect that most of the future cameras will now have a 3.2-inch screen. It's a beautiful screen. It has two card slots, a CF and an SD. Why they didn't go with the XQD or QXD card that Sony's making, you know, that they put into the D4, I don't know. I mean, it would have made more sense in my mind if you're going to adopt a new format for some of your cameras, that you would probably adopt it for all. Because now if you pick up a D800 and you have a D4, you're going to have SD cards, compact flash cards, and the QXD card. And, you know, I would like transparency all across the board. That's just me. So, you know, I would use compact flash cards most likely for stills and video. I'd use the SD card probably just for stills as redundancy there. It has USB 3.0 built in for transferring, but it doesn't have an Ethernet cable, an Ethernet plug. So you're not going to be able to tether through the Ethernet. And with that, you won't be able to shoot wirelessly with the WT5. I know that could be a deal breaker for some people, because now you can't do the wireless transfer with the WT5. You've got to go with the WT4. I'm pretty sure that it's compatible with that one. It has the same new meter as the D4. Still the really fast, updated autofocus system. What else do my notes say here? Okay, this is an interesting one. Being that it's such a large sensor, 36.3 megapixels. That means each file is going to be large. It's going to be huge. I'd venture to say it's 40 to 50 megabytes per RAW file. With that, you're only going to get 4 frames a second. 4 frames a second burst modes, all right? And there's no way to speed that up like the D700 where you put the grip, the booster grip on there. I'm pretty sure that happened in the D700. I know it happened in the 300S. But that, again, 4 frames a second, no way to speed that up. Now, you can speed it up if you want to shoot in DX mode, but that kind of defeats the purpose of using the full sensor there. So that is something that's interesting and for you to keep in mind, that if you are used to run and gun type weddings and shooting faster, you're only going to get 4 frames a second because of the file size is so large, which also makes you question why it doesn't have that new QXD card in there for the faster rate of transfer, especially that this is going to be a killer video. But again, we'll get into video in a few seconds. The battery is a D7000 battery. I think they said D7000 battery. Now I've got to double check that because they may have said it had the D700 battery. I'm going to have to double check that off the top of my head. I added a 0 somewhere. But I know with the grip, you will be able to use the D... Oh yeah, I think it wouldn't be a D7000 battery, it would be a D700 battery. Okay, that's not that bad. That's a good thing. But when you put the grip on, you now have the option to use the D4 battery. That just means you now need to own a new charger for the D4 battery and a D4 battery itself. Let's see. You can buy that grip. That's going to be another expense there. When you do that, it's got the dial for when you shoot vertically that you can use to change your focusing points, just like in the D4. No Ethernet, no WT5. Let's talk about some of the video before I turn pages over here. So the video is a killer thing in this camera. That's what I think I would buy one for, strictly video. Well, I'd probably use it for stills for some things, but the video is why I would pick this up. You've got your 1080p. The video is similar to the D4. It's basically the same thing that you could do in the D4. You can now do in the D800. The one thing you can't do is the crop mode in the 2.7 time crop mode. You have 2 of the 3 crop modes in this one. Well, it's not a crop mode, but you've got FX. You can shoot at 1080p, 24 frames, 30 frames, and 720 at 60p. In the DX mode, so you would get the 1.5 crop factor to do your video. You're still shooting at the 1080p as well as 24 and 30, as well as the 720 at 60p. You now have the option, just like the D4, to have the HDMI out to do the uncompressed in 8-bit 422, or you could also connect a what is this thing? An HDMI monitor to help you basically view what your scene is going to be. So that's a good function. So the video quality in this camera is going to be tremendous. I can't say if it's on par or better than a D4 at this point because there are no models of them out at this point that this video is being made. Now, I did ask the Nikon people what they thought, if it was better than the D4 or not. So the D4 is going to be better in low light situations at higher ISOs because it goes higher than the D800. But the D800 has more megapixels, which I think may play a part in giving you better quality video. I don't know why. I don't know why they said that to me, but they said that they may prefer this D800 for video over the D4, which is something very interesting. We're going to have to see how the samples look to determine, if that is the case. I know they were telling me that there was an amazing video shot by a great director who used the D800 and he shot in Chicago. That's probably up right now. I'm going to have to watch that. That's going to be pretty cool. So we know that the video is similar to the D4. That's a cool thing. Obviously, you'll probably get less time out of your battery because it's a smaller battery than your D4, so it's going to probably chew through that a little more. So that basically takes us through the front page here. We talked about the D800E just a little bit before. Price range, you're going to be $3,000 for this camera. It's a cool price range. It's a little more than what the D700 was selling for, which was $26.99, down to, I think it got as low as $24.99. The D800E model will be more expensive, and it's going to be $300 more. So you're looking at $3,300. The D4, $6 grand. D800, $3 grand, half the price. You could buy 2 of those for one price of a D4. So when we come back right after I take this quick break and just recycle and turn the page, we're going to hit who this is for. Before we get to who it's for, I want to take you back through how it felt in my hands. The model that I used had a 50 millimeter 1.4 AFS on it, which obviously doesn't matter. You can put any lens on it. I wasn't allowed to take sample images yet because it wasn't a final production copy, and I don't even know if those exist just yet. Now, I tried it with the battery grip, and I will say that it felt different in my hands than a D4. Of course, it's going to feel different from using the Pro body versus using this D800, which is still a Pro body. It just felt not as ergonomically sound in my hands. Now, anybody that used a D700 and that has used a D3S or anything from a D2H to a D3S would know that the Pro bodies just have that feel that it just, like, your hand wraps around it and it just feels good. I'm not saying the D800 didn't feel good, but it didn't feel as nice as the D4 does in my hands. So without the grip, it's going to feel a little different, of course, but basically, if I could explain this to you, it feels a little narrower. It's not as wide as the D4 or the D3S, so that is just the difference in the feel. Now, the buttons on the back, it's not as cluttered as a D4. The D4 has a ton of batteries on the back. You can see what a ton of buttons on the back. You can see what that looks like right now on the screen. And now we're going to look at what the D800 looks like on the back. So you still have that live view switch. That's a good thing, that you can go from live view for video, live view for stills. That's a good button to have. But as you see on the back, there's not as much clutter there. Now, I don't mind the clutter of what's on the D4 because it all has a purpose. There's a reason why everything is there. But the D800, less buttons, it's still amazing. I mean, it's a camera that I think I want in my bag, and I may order one. We'll see about that in a second. Let me pick up some of these notes real quick. So I talked about what it feels like. I know a little bit of a detraction here is that it doesn't take the new WT5 wireless unit that the D4 does. I don't know why that compatibility wouldn't be there. I mean, to offer a WT5 and what it does and have the camera be its own website so that you can view images from the iPad or all of these different things, I don't know why that's the case. That doesn't make me too happy. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about the viewfinder, it's 100% viewfinder, whereas the D700 was either a 93 to a 96% coverage. So what you see, the viewfinder was beautiful. When I was holding it up, you can see just everything was just bright. It's like a D4 viewfinder on top, just on a smaller body. So, that was good. Opinions, we know everybody's got one. Who's it for or who's it not for? Will I get one? D7, okay. So, yeah, some detractions from this camera. It's slower shooting because the file size is so large. Now, they've really separated the two models here. You've got your D4, which is over here. You've got your D800, which is over here. Where on the old way, you had a D700 and a D3. They were on the same plane because they had the same sensor. And being that they had the same sensor, the image quality was very similar. Also, the speed of the D700 was quicker than this D800 because it was only a 12 megapixel sensor. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, I mean, if you're used to motor driving through your images with a D700, you're not going to be able to do that as much with this. So you're not going to be able to, get that kiss going on when the bride walking down the aisle, and you're not going to be able to go boom, boom. You're going to be like boom, 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 boom. It's a little slower. So that's something to take into consideration. The files are going to be much larger, which means now your RAW files, because we all shoot RAW, or I shoot RAW, and a lot of you guys out there shoot RAW, it means you're going to take up a lot more space on your hard drives, because the images are much larger than your D700. Matter of fact, these are going to be larger than the D4. So that's something to keep in mind there. But I guess being that you're shooting slower, you may not shoot as many pictures as you would have if you had the ability to shoot them much faster. It's interesting that the grip doesn't boost this any. That's something that's interesting. Now, the $3,000 price range, that's a good thing. So let's get into who it's for. Wedding photographers, studio photographers, fashion photographers. It's not for a sports photographer in my mind because it's not going to shoot fast enough and the file sizes are just going to be enormous. Videographers, it's going to be very, very good for people who are looking to capture video. high quality HD video with a lot of different options. That 8-bit 422 option where you can go out from the HDMI is going to be great for video. That's why I could see picking one of these up. I could see using that for making this type of video, because right now I'm using the D7000. The D800 is going to give me that 20 minutes or that 29.59 as well. So I am looking forward to that for myself. But wedding photographers, it's going to be good. Studio photographers, it's going to give you incredible studio images. You're going to want to, well, not that you want to shoot tethered, but you will have, you should have that option somehow through the USB 3.0, I would hope, because you could do it with all the older cameras. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that. Where it's going to be good for landscapes and studio shooting and fashion, it's because a lot of those people look for the dynamic range of their files for that type of shot. A lot of people use medium format, and they said this is bridging on the quality of medium format when you're in the studio. Doesn't mean when you're not in the studio, you're not going to get that type of quality. But, you know, it's also for people that can't afford to go with a D4. It's a great camera for just about anything. I know you say 6400 ISO tops out, and I say that like, oh my God, 6400 ISO, it's not that high. That's still pretty high. I could see using this to shoot bands. Why not? If I want a big file size, then I'll shoot it. Especially if I'm in the pit and I've got good lighting, I'm going to see what happens when I use it. But for me, it's going to be more of a video type camera to capture different scenes when I'm out shooting with my D4, and I want a really cool camera like the D800 to capture video for me. $3,000, I think that's a tremendous price range. I think that falls in the sweet spot for a ton of people. You've got your wedding photographers, your advanced amateurs, all different types of people this camera is geared to. So $3,000 price range is a very, very good price point, at least in my mind. Will I get one? We know that I've answered that pretty much. Absolutely. I think I'm going to get one just to do video, and I don't know about the stills up to this point. Why would you go with the D4 over this? Well, we'll say this, that if you need the higher ISO capability, you would go with the D4, and one, if you can afford it. That, we're going to say if you can afford it, why would you go with the D4 over the D800? One, you know, higher ISO capability. You've got the faster burst. You're shooting at 10 frames a second. So that's going to be great for sports photographers, like your Sports Illustrated photographers, your newspaper shooters, your photojournalistic shooters. I don't see why a wedding photographer wouldn't have one of these, maybe even have one of these and a D800, you know, for those low light situations and where you want to shoot quicker. I like the D4 for that for me. But for everybody else, you know, if you can't afford the D4 because it is $6,000, there's nothing wrong with a D800 at $3,000. Now, here's something interesting too. If you have no desire to shoot video, what is going to happen to those D700s that people are going to be dumping to get D800s? They are going to drop in price. Where they're selling for $2,000 today before the D800 was announced, and that's used, the price is going to drop at least another $500. You're going to look at $1,500 to get a full frame sensor, a full frame D3 sensor. That's going to be a great camera for anybody. If you're shooting studio, if you're shooting weddings, whatever you're shooting, and you want to take that next step up, but you can't afford $3,000, I think you're going to be in the $1,500 to $1,800 range to pick up a full frame camera. That's going to be a steal. So guys, look for that. If you're an advanced amateur looking for the next camera up, you don't want to wait for, say, a D400 if that hypothetically exists. Because you're stuck between, should I get a D7000 for $1,200, or should I step up to, say, a D700 used? I think a D700 used would be an amazing way to go, especially if you're not shooting video. So I know I've rambled on here, and we're going to have a follow-up with this on Spreecast. We're going to talk about the who's it's for, the pros, the cons, and all of that. So to wrap it up, you have a 36.3 megapixel camera, $3,000 for the D800. The D800E without the low-pass filter is going to be $3,300, and that's, we've explained who that's for. It's going to be stunning video, stunning dynamic range with the images, You know, there's a lot of technical stuff we could get into, but I can leave you to read the press release or the annotations popping up on the screen. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. You can always pick one of these up at Allen's Camera. They support the site, and without them, we probably wouldn't have been able to get as far as we've gotten because they supported us from day one. So you could pre-buy, not pre-buy, but you can put your name on the list at Allen's Camera. Please give them a call or check out allenscamera.com for all the information about what you can pick up there. All of your Nikon gear there. They'll even take your D700 in trade towards a D800, you know, depending on the quality of your camera and how good it is, the shape that it's in. So thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, leave them as comments below. If I made some things wrong in this video saying it, I will try to make the annotations correct. Thank you guys again for watching. It's a very exciting time for Nikon fans because we've got all these new cameras coming out. It's exciting, not to the bottom line, because your pocketbook is going to hurt just a little bit, but that's about it. That's the Nikon D800 preview. Look for an unboxing, sniff test, and full hands-on, and hopefully, maybe I'll be buying one. We shall see. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya!